captured the entire nation's attention from Maine to California, just like a national lottery. The kind where the pot is $200, $300, $400 million, and every single person you know, those have never even played the lottery before, have bought a ticket, caught the fever, and have at least just a chance of winning, where everyone is literally on the edge of their seats waiting for the outcome. Well, that was Scott Brown's election to the United States Senate. There have been very, very few special elections in this country that have captured the entire nation's attention because the stakes were so high and the outcome so important. So when Scott was elected, he became the 41st Republican senator who, because of the rules of the Senate, was destined to be the deciding vote against President Obama's national health care plan in Congress. Or was he? Here again, Scott's election made history, only this time a bit more indirectly. Just as he promised when running for the Senate, Scott voted against the national health care proposal. His vote became so important that the Democrat-controlled Congress invoked rarely used rules to ensure that it would not and could not be the vote to sink their plan. The results of this parliamentary maneuver they used to get around his vote left a bitter taste in the mouth of a lot of Americans, which in turn led to historic gains for the Republican Party just 9 months later. Now, importantly, there is another 1 in a million aspect of Scott's life that stands as or more improbable than his remarkable election to the United States Senate. And you will discover this in his book. I will not spoil it for your readers, but you will find that Scott, in addition to being a newly minted senator, is also a very talented writer. He lives in Wrentham, Massachusetts, which is just about 30 miles from Chelsea, the birthplace of another great writer by the name of Horatio Alger. Few, if any, writers in American history are known better for their stories about the lives of impoverished young boys who rise from their humble beginnings through their sheer grit, determination, and courage to succeed. And few, if any, sitting members of Congress have had to persevere through more difficult circumstances and hard knocks than Scott Brown to get to where he is today. So he is the quintessential modern-day Horatio Alger story, where in heroic fashion he beats the toughest of odds, not to enrich himself, but to serve his nation and the people of Massachusetts. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator Scott Brown. Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Well, before I get started, I just want to say I had an opportunity to go around and meet everybody and say hello. And I know you talked about the weather here. No offense. I have snow that's as high as the flags over here. So, and I did get a chance to go and tour this amazing facility and be part of history. It's such a wonderful opportunity for not just young people, but every person from every walk of life, and I'm so honored to be here. I want to thank you all for the very, very warm welcome. And John, I appreciate the kind introduction and the chance to visit the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. You know, this is my first time here, and what an honor it is for me to really meet a living legend, obviously, and Nancy Reagan herself, and it's wonderful to be with you, ma'am. Thank you. It's a tremendous thrill for me to be here, and it was great to meet so many of you at the book signing. I tried to meet all of you and get pictures and learn about you and your families, and you said such nice things. I just hope that the reviewers are just as charitable. And as you may assume, there's a lot of pressure, big pressure on a first-time author, especially when you're out there talking about your life story. Now, I haven't felt so exposed since I appeared in Cosmopolitan magazine in 1982. Now, it's just, now I guess, you can imagine also that you do not see too many mass Massachusetts Republicans coming out this way. In this year-end month of Ronald Reagan Centennial, I'm proud to note of the connections between our 40th president and the Bay State. Just for starters, Mrs. Reagan and I were talking out in the hall, and she is a distinguished graduate of a fine Massachusetts school, Smith College in Northampton. I've been there many times. You're right, it is a wonderful school. And then there's the portrait of the great man that President Reagan gave a place of honor in the cabinet room. It's the former Massachusetts governor, Calvin Coolidge. And I'll wager that the magnificent Air Force One that I saw, and many of you have seen out in the area that is just as big as I could tell, I've never seen such a large museum space, has set down more than a few times at Logan Airport and Hanscom Air Force Base, because as a candidate, as you know, Ronald Reagan carried my state. And you also know that no other Republican has won Massachusetts in the last 50 years. And the Gipper did it twice. And when I think of Ronald Reagan, I think of someone who was larger than life, a powerful figure who was proud to be American. I did my small part. Yeah, you can clap on that. It's true. It's true. And I, like you, did my part in supporting him. And in the working class neighborhoods where I lived, that put me in the majority. To this day, in American politics, we speak of Reagan Republicans and Reagan Democrats. And that's the legacy of a man who respected everyone and spoke to everyone. Now, a lot of old political assumptions fell away in his time because his convictions were so clear and his integrity was so obvious. People of every background, even many who had never considered voting for a Republican, sized up Ronald Reagan and thought, you know what, this is my kind of guy. He understands the country. He wants everyone to have a chance. And he knows that in this world, the United States of America is a force for good. The American people, Reagan said, are hopeful, big-hearted, idealistic, daring, decent, and fair. He was all of these things himself, and everyone could see that. We can all think of leaders throughout history who had qualities of greatness, but came up a little short in the qualities of goodness. And somehow we remember this great man we think of as good. He was engaged in the biggest of his time, but kindness and courtesy were never, ever beneath him. It's just the way he carried himself, that confident, gentlemanly manner. He was all class. And in Hollywood, you can't even fake that. Sometimes the best tributes come from opponents because they're the ones, as you all know, that are looking for weaknesses. And it was a notable adversary who once said of President Reagan, a largeness of spirit infused his presidency. Ronald Reagan was one of those rare presidents who lifted our vision and enlarged our very conception of this nation and its mission on earth. His time will long glow in history and memory. That was pretty high praise, coming as it did from Edward M. Kennedy. And while nobody could ever call Ted a Reagan Democrat, he certainly knew the type. And he knew that they don't like either party taking their votes for granted. The Reagan Democrats, many of you know, are still a mighty force in my state and definitely across this country. I'm not here today as a successor for the late Senator Kennedy. So, I guess, as you know, there was a little bit of luck working for me last year too. Although when I got into the Senate race, I'm sure it didn't look like I was a guy about to catch any breaks, as you all know. And after the passing of Senator Kennedy, most people thought that the special election would be decided in the Democratic primary. Simple as that. And who wanted to be the sad sack Republican who was going to take the fall in the general election? It's me. Well, I'll tell you what, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be the Republican nominee, and not just to prove that I could lose by a little instead of by a lot. And I remember talking to some political pros about getting into the race, and they were sure I couldn't make it. But they did see one upside. By getting my name out there, apparently, and raising my statewide profile, maybe, just maybe, I to myself for run it like state treasurer or state auditor or something like that down the road. And even after I managed to get the Republican nomination, I heard the same thing from commentators. With certain defeat awaiting me, I must be trying to set myself up, apparently, for some type of consolation prize later on. Yeah, this is the way it is. It's Massachusetts. I never bought into that type of thinking. I sensed opportunity and a chance for change. And on the other side, I just sensed overconfidence. Now, many of you who may know me will know I'm a competitive guy. And I've always loved the game of basketball. I learned early on that no self-respecting player ever leaves the court before taking his best shot. The way I saw it, running for the United States Senate was absolutely no different. I was going to give it my best shot and take absolutely nothing for granted. I was going to run hard, and I was going to run to win. In our lives, we all know that at some time in our lives, we're all the underdog at one time or another. I hope my book will help others to get through those trying times. Because everyone, when saying that something can't be done, that however worthy the goal, it's just not possible. Let me tell you something. When your gut tells you otherwise, you have to go with your gut. And if it's truly in your heart to take a big chance, then my advice is ignore the doubters and give every last thing that's inside you. Because sometimes it just taking a risk and overcoming the fear of failure is actually a kind of victory in itself. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's how I've always felt. And you never know. You just never know when you might just beat the odds and go all the way. And Against All Odds seemed like a fitting title for a story of my unlikely win last year. And frankly, for the longer tale that you'll actually find in the book. It's my life. It's definitely my life. And as you'll quickly gather, it's not been cleaned up or made to look any more gentle or tidy than it really was. A time of two, it was suggested that I could be a little more vague, about the things I experienced, and a little faster over the rough spots toward the happy ending of being a United States. The attitude was, there were serving books by politicians, and quite frankly, I didn't want my name on them. I didn't want my name on it. So I left in some stuff I'm quite frankly not especially proud of. In a few moments in my life that I'd rather have forgotten. I just figured that if I was going to tell my story at all, I ought to just trust you, the readers, and just tell it straight. About some of the earlier experiences I recount in this book, let me just say that no one will accuse me of idealizing my youth. It's a life story, you have to tell about your family, and my family was, when I was a kid, wasn't anyone's idea of a model household. My mom and dad, between them, had 8 marriages. Yep, 8 marriages. Just so you know, mom is happily divorced and dad is happily married. And as I grew up in various towns outside Boston, dad was always in and out of my life, and unfortunately, he was mostly out. We moved 17 times by the time I was 18. And it was always either in a cheap apartment or someone else's house. And my mom raised my Leanne and me basically alone. She did waitressing work, office work, and other odd jobs. And at times, yes, we were even on public assistance. My mom had it pretty hard, sometimes adding to her own troubles. And having a restless kid like me around who looked and acted a lot like his absent father, while getting harder to handle every year, didn't exactly brighten her outlook either. The stepdads who came and went in our lives included some pretty sorry characters. 2 of them had a very violent streak that brought a lot of grief and fear into our lives. Just to give you an idea of how miserable we were with one of these guys, when the house we shared with him came up for sale a few years ago, I dropped by, I looked at it, brought back a lot of memories, and as I was leaving and driving away, I said, man, I wish I had some money, so I could just, buy the place and burn it down. It was, yeah, I know, it would have been trouble. It really was that unpleasant sometimes, and there was no getting around the plain telling of it in my book. But let me tell you, before you take the receipt, and I know a lot of you save them, and see if you can return the copies on your way out of here, you should know that things do get better in the last chapters. They do, yeah, they do. It's a hopeful book, and I'm glad to say that my mom and dad are in my life and play a pivotal role in it. And they know and love their grandchildren. And we're all content to focus on what we have today instead of what could have been or should have been in years past. And besides, when it comes to family, I've got absolutely no complaints. My luck turned in a big way in the mid-1980s when I married my wife, Gail. And our girls, Ayla and Ariana, are grown now. And being the dad in a happy family has been the greatest thing in the world that has happened to me. I'm not going to cry. It's a world away from what we called a family when I was growing up. And when you see the opposite, you can never, ever take a loving, peaceful home for granted, ever. Most of us, when we think back on our own personal journeys, and I know I'm not the only one who had time, we can remember the toughest times. I know in this way, it says tough times, you think back and you say, wow. And that's how it was with me in writing this book. It wasn't hard to pull up the details of some of the adversity that came my way. For example, when a 6-year-old young boy is taking the best punches of a drunken stepdad, and when a kid can't even find a safe haven at a Bible camp, I won't lie, it leaves a mark. For me, when there were times in my boyhood when I felt like I couldn't trust anyone. For a while, I wasn't actually even that trustworthy myself, and fell in with some older kids whose idea of an afternoon outing was going to the mall to do some shoplifting. And that's how I found myself at age 13, sitting in a big courtroom, facing an even bigger judge, and feeling that like the little thief that I actually was. The judge, a fine man named Judge Samuel Zoll, didn't know that I'd even ripped off the suit that I was wearing that day. But the judge didn't know. He didn't know that there was a young kid in there who could still go, hey, what's the other? He gave me the talking to that I needed, and a big break that started to point me in a better direction. There were other great people in my life, teachers, basketball coaches, and parents of friends who showed up in my life just in time. From them, I learned to take responsibility for the first time in my life, to channel my energy in a structured way, and to give discipline in whatever talent that I actually had. And for so long, I remember it like it was yesterday, for so long I felt like a loser kid who was missing out on everything good. And they showed me how much I really had going for me. And in part because of them, and also because of my grandparents. Things never completely came unraveled. And I escaped to beat the odds. Well, let me just take a little drink here. I hope you like basketball. How many people like that? I like the Celtics a little better than the Clippers and the Lakers, however, but that's okay. Don't hold that against me, all right? But I hope you do like basketball because there's a lot of it in the book. I love to lose myself in the intensity of the game when I played. On the court, all the chaos and letdowns of my daily life were completely out of my mind. There were clear rules and boundaries that I actually needed. I knew my abilities and how to use them when I played. I once told my coach, as a matter of fact, when I was younger, probably junior, 8th and 9th grade, that I wanted to wear knee pads, because that was the cool thing. And he told me, he said, Scott, listen, serious players aren't the guys with knee pads, but the ones with the scrapes and bruises because they always dive for the ball and then brush off the pain. Those are the guys you got to watch out for. And given my home life, I knew exactly what it meant to brush off the pain. So on the basketball court, I wasn't the fastest kid, but being tough and a hard worker counted for an awful lot. Now, LA basketball fans remember the wisdom of the great and legendary coach John Wooden. He said, never let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. It was relevant then and it's relevant today. And that type of thinking helped me to see past my own limitations. To supplement my financial aid while playing basketball, I held jobs that usually involved a mop or a paintbrush or a shovel. Any honest work that would pay the bills, and it was good by me because it kept me moving closer to something better that I knew that was out there. And when reporters in this most recent Senate race actually thought that I had a chance to win, they did a little research, and in my background, I'm shocked. Shocked. And they didn't linger on my 25-year legal career, my years in the legislature, my 31 years in the Army National Guard. No. What really got their attention was the work I did in the 80s for the magazine. Let's just say it seemed like a good idea at the time. Especially when they FedExed me a ticket to New York City and a check for $1,000 back in the 80s. That was good. And there I was without a nickel to my name and a mountain full of tuition bills ahead of me. So I accepted. And for a while, there I was. I was the Cosmo guy, accepting all the duties and privileges you might imagine that would come with such a title. I was even on the Today Show back then. Yep, even on the Today Show. Brian Gumbel, Jane Pauley, you remember it. And in the green room, I remember someone asked if being the contest winner might actually hinder a political future if I had one in mind. I said, no, politics isn't for me. Anyway, I figured, who's going to care about these pictures 30 years from now? Go figure. Strange as it might sound, the experiences I write about in this book, and yes, even my modeling days, they add up to a life that I wouldn't trade for anything. It's often like that, as you know. You all know that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just like you in those thoughts. We look back and we see how even the rough times that we've had, all those rough experiences have actually shaped us for the good. They've actually made us who we are. And I try to get that across in my book. It's a story that millions and millions of other people could tell, with different scenes and scenarios and different details about being poor and feeling trapped and wishing you could just, get up and run away from it all. To some kids, whether they're in Boston or South Central LA, that's all life seems to offer sometimes. Let me tell you something. I know for a fact that I'm a better man for having been one of those kids. With no money in my pocket, no father to protect me and my sister, no feelings of pride of achievement outside of basketball. And if my story can help one kid show that everything can be better if they listen to the right people, let me tell you something. I'll take that over even the best book review. It's also a book about second chances and the people who gave them to me. Maybe the only people we remember better than the ones who knocked us down, and we all have them, are the gracious ones who helped us up and actually gave us a break in our lives and encouraged us and gave us the encouragement and direction we needed when absolutely no one else would. They didn't even think that we'd be worth the trouble. And I know better than to think that any good thing in my life was preordained. I know that. And I've come this far only because long ago, a few people in my life thought I was actually worth the trouble. And thank goodness for that. Recalling a coach from his own youth, President Reagan said the man, quote, bases rating on games won or lost, the record of the player in later life, what kind of man the boy had become. I had a couple of coaches just like that, whose good influence I can still feel today. I still have a relationship with these coaches, these mentors in my life today. And they found a decent work ethic in me and reinforced it on a daily basis. They toughened up my inside game. They gave me confidence to play with the best and to never, ever let the other team inside my head. Those are the strengths that will serve you well in any line of work. And let me tell you, they absolutely come in handy if you're a Republican running for political office in Massachusetts. And like many kids in my state and of my generation, I grew up respecting the name of John F. Kennedy. Even in our messed up houses, we often had a picture of JFK on the wall. And Ted had followed him in the seat and held it from the time I was 3 years old, 51 now. And on top of that honored legacy, we're in a state where all of 12% of registered voters are Republicans. 12%. Any Republican who bothers to run for political office isn't just taking on an opponent. Taking on the entire Democratic State Committee and this whole machine of unions and special interests. Most times they can keep a pretty tight hold on things in Massachusetts. And my race was different for a whole lot of reasons. In a bad economy with 2 wars going on, voters were in a pretty serious frame of mind, while the machine was treating the whole thing as a formality. I ran on the issues, and voters appreciated being treated as if they actually had a choice. I said that a government takeover of health care was a bad idea, and I was against it. I also said that we needed to get off the road of big government and dangerous debt and focus again on private enterprise and growing our economy and new jobs for our people. In dealing with America's terrorism, we said that our tax dollars should pay for weapons to stop them, not lawyers to defend them. And you know what? The default position of the political machine is always to brush off political Republican candidates who are running for office as right-wing nuts. Well, this time it was different. It didn't fly in Massachusetts. And I remember a short time before the final debate. I remember it like it was yesterday, on a bitter cold night. Not as cold as it is here. This is tropical. Come on. I shook hands. I actually went outside. It had to have been 10 or 20 below zero. It was a cold night. But they were out there holding signs for each other, and I went outside and I shook hands with everybody, including those people who were supporting my opponent. They were mostly union guys, and to a person they said, "Hey, Scott, shh, we're voting for you." Yeah, because we're getting paid to hold these signs, Scott, but yeah, we're voting for you, yes. That was sure a confidence builder for the debate that I was having about an hour later. Usual back and forth until one question was put to me by the moderator. It was a chance to say what was on everybody's mind. The question was whether I was really, really willing to vote against Obamacare, even as the senator from Massachusetts holding, quote, Ted Kennedy's seat. Well, I began my answer. Look, with all due respect, it's not the Kennedy seat, and it's not the Democrat seat. It's the people's seat, and it's still the people's seat. And from that point on, it was amazing. You could feel a real shift in the momentum of the race, and it wasn't long before a quick visit to Boston was added to the president's schedule. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. And my response was that the President of the United States is always welcome in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I even forgave him for disrespecting my truck. It's too late because something bigger than both of us was happening in Massachusetts. The ideals of Reagan Republicans and Reagan Democrats were once again uniting us. And as I said on election night, if it can happen in Massachusetts, it can happen again all over America. Yep. And it did, because as we saw again in this past election in November, there are some convictions that need only be stated plainly to win a majority. And at a time when the national debt is more than $14 trillion and rising, if you stand for spending discipline, then the people will stand with you. And with 8, 9, or 10% of our fellow citizens out of work, and a year and a half after we're told that the recession's ended, let our opponents try to pitch another stimulus bill or go to the barricades to keep Obamacare, see what happens. And if our cause is free enterprise, lower taxes, and personal responsibility, then trust me, a lot of working people keep carrying those Democratic signs, but they're going to vote Republican. Well, I've been in the Senate now for a little over a year now, a year and a couple of weeks. And to this day, I keep on my mantle in my office a picture of Ted Kennedy. You know, it reminds me not only of someone I liked and admired, but also of a promise I made to my friends back home, which was to work with good people wherever I find them. I've always told my fellow Republicans, if you're looking for a full-on ideologue, I'm not your guy. But to someone who needs an ally in the cause of limited government, individual liberty, in the confident advance of freedom in this world, then I say count me in. Because that's the cause that earned my loyalty long ago, in the days of President Reagan. In the way of examples to follow, there is no finer example than President Reagan. And let me just say in closing, because I know I hear some grumbly stomachs out there. Thank you for braving the weather and coming. I think I'm going to go run in my shorts a little later. But truly, Mrs. Reagan, I feel like I'm dreaming. I'm so honored to meet you. You and your husband were such role models for all of us as Americans. And it's truly been my privilege to join each and every one of you at this beautiful place that bears his name. So thank you, God bless, and have a wonderful dinner. Thank you. Thank you. Please sit down. Sit down. I know we're getting hungry. I just want to go down and say hello to Mrs. Reagan just for a minute, so I'll be right back, okay?
Well, Senator Brown has been kind enough to agree to spend about 10, 12 minutes with us answering some questions, and we solicited the questions from you as you came through to the library this evening.
And I haven't seen them, so here we go.
I think you'll find this first one interesting.
Who's going to win the NBA play? Oh, I'm sorry. Celtics, come on. Ooh. Hey. Okay, go ahead. I know everyone's hungry. Fire away.
What do you think about what is happening in Wisconsin now?
The question was, what's happening in Wisconsin? Obviously, the people of Wisconsin are trying to get a handle on that $3.6 billion structural debt. They elected a new governor to deal with that problem. They elected a new legislature to back him up. He sent his man to the legislature and encouraged the senators to come back and do the people's business. And everything is on the table right now, folks. We are in very deep fiscal trouble, not only federally, but in each individual state, as you all know. And everybody needs to get in a room, sit down, and hammer things out in a mature, responsible, fair way so the citizens of Wisconsin can actually compete not only throughout this country, but throughout the world in a global market.
In light of the recent shooting of Congresswoman Gifford, what are your opinions regarding the protection of congressmen and senators during public appearances?
Well, I feel safe that you're protecting me today. I must say that. Well, first of all, listen, what happened to the Congresswoman is shameful. And the individual who did it, there's absolutely no excuse for it. My thoughts and prayers go out to her and her family. I'm so thankful that she is moving along and seems to be getting better. But let's not forget the young girl that was killed and the others that were actually killed. And the political rhetoric throughout this country, while we have the ability to freely and openly debate and criticize, you also need to be, respectful, like President Reagan and Tip O'Neill. I mean, remember they're battling, but then they go out and have a beer, right?
Yep.
And no, I don't use any additional security, but I will say I am aware, and when I feel that the threat level rises, I do what I have to do to protect myself and my family. And my deepest wish is that people debate, they disagree, they solve problems, but in my personal philosophy is I will debate to death, and I will argue to death in a respectful, responsible manner. And then after I go out and be with you after, that's how I try to do my bargaining and negotiating. So
What surprised you the most about Washington, D.C.?
that's easy. You laugh, but what surprised me the most is I've traveled, and I am the luckiest guy in the world, no doubt about it. And I am blessed to be a United States Senator. There couldn't be anything aside from the birth of my kids and my marriage that I'm more proud of. But as I travel around the world to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, Dubai, and Jordan, and around this country, you know what they talk about overseas? From the prime ministers and presidents and business leaders all the way down to the poorest farmer pushing a cart full of pomegranates, they talk about jobs. And since I've been in the United States Senate, up until we got back, we spent 12 to 15 days talking about anything to do with jobs. We're in the middle of a 2-year recession, and we've done nothing to do with anything to do with jobs. I mean, are you kidding me? Really? So here we are. We're in a new year. I'm encouraged that we are looking at the debt and deficit. And while everyone else is talking about, illegal immigration, I'm talking about jobs. When I'm talking about this or that, I'm talking about jobs. And finally, it seems we're focusing on jobs. And we'll see. The first issue was the 1099 fix. We'll do that. Deal with the device tax and the health care bill. Fix a lot of the things. Streamline, consolidate. Do whatever we can to get this economy moving. Repatriate all that offshore money. Work on the tax code. Reduce corporate taxes. There's so many things that we can do. And we're missing such a great opportunity right now to work with the American people on a bipartisan, bicameral basis to do just that. The people of the United States of America sent a very powerful message in November that they're tired of business as usual. So we need to get our fiscal house in order. I'm so anxious to get back to do just that.
How did your experiences as a child affect the way you raise your own children?
Well, I haven't missed any basketball games or recitals or parent-teacher things. I am probably, it's funny when I was doing work wherever I was, okay, what time is the game? And I try to teach them the things that I learned, and the things that I did learn, I try to teach them better. And we all can learn and grow from our parents' mistakes. And I remember growing up and I said, I'm not doing that. I'm definitely not doing that. I may do that, but I'm going to try to do a little bit better. And yeah, I like that. So, and you will read in the book, and I hope you all do get the book, because it does send a very powerful message that regardless of your circumstances, and there are many, many, many people who have way worse circumstances than I do. If you have a few good people around you, just there as mentors, you can actually make a difference. So I've tried to just be a good dad, the best way I can. We're a family that, like many other families, are a work in progress. But I think so far so good, knock on wood.
How did your parents feel about the book?
Well, as you saw, my parents have had their own difficulties. They're the first ones to admit that they made mistakes, but it was a different time. 50, 40 years ago, different time for women, different time as young people. My parents were obviously concerned about everyone knowing their business, but they were also very thankful that I created this opportunity to actually talk about the things that we had dealt with in our family, because probably like many of you, there's certain taboo things you don't talk about in your family. And I remember when I was dealing with some of the abuse issues at camp, and I called home wanting to come home, and my mom 3 or 4 weeks ago said, "Was that the time when you wanted to come home from camp when you were being abused?" I said, "Yeah." And she says, "I'm so sorry." And that enabled us to then talk about a few other things and other things and other things. And my dad, 4 weeks ago, we sat down for breakfast, and he's dealing with Parkinson's. He's battling in his own health right now. And he looked me in the eye and he said, "I'm sorry. Wish I had known. Wish I had been there." And that enabled us to. I said, "Oh, great!" It was like this big weight being lifted off me, and it was like, "Wow, okay, he gets it now." And we were able to build on a relationship. Like any other families, folks, we are working, but they love me. Any time that they spend battling and doing things in their lives, now concentrating on our kids, which has wonderful value to me and to them.
What compelled you to seek the Senate seat in the first place, that it was so traditionally Democratic?
Well, it was on a dare, first of all. Don't ever challenge me. That's why the president doesn't want to play me in basketball. Okay?
If I could just, in the middle of your answer, that's actually the final question. Could you beat the president of basketball?
Just tell him to bring his wallet. But, yeah, but seriously, yeah, I could beat him. I've been blessed. I've had, like I said, good people. I enjoy playing sports. A lot of references to sports in the book. There's so many things that we're dealing with now. It's overwhelming, and you are dealing with them here on a more local basis. You know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm going to go off topic just a minute. We are at the point right now in our country that we have to make some very tough and serious decisions about where we go as a country. Are we going to be a leader like in the days of President Reagan, or are we going to be a follower? Are we going to be kind of going along? And I, for one, want to be proud to be an American, as I am now. I want to be prouder. I want to be able to get our fiscal and financial house in order. I want us to be leaders when it comes to, our national security, setting the example, and letting people know that when they invest their dollars here in the United States of America, they're going to be safe. So we need to make some very serious choices, and I'm hopeful that we'll do it in a rational, responsible manner, because, listen, 2011, this is the time to do it. There's going to be plenty of time for politics, folks. 2012, we will politic, you'll see all the nice commercials, and I'll say, oh, my God, not again. 2011, though, we need to get to work. We've got to get to work. You demand it. You send a message. We need leadership from everybody, top to bottom. So, is there any other questions?
That's it. That's all we have time for.
Listen, thank you very much. Enjoy your dinners.